job in raising issues and having the candidates talk about our views on issues rather than just the kind of gotcha thing that sometimes happens with media interviews. I thought it was a good chance for us to ask each other questions. I asked the President some of the questions I know people across America have wanted to ask him. I asked him, for instance, why with 23 million Americans that were looking for work and wanted a president that would focus on getting the economy going, he instead spent his first few years fighting for Obamacare. I asked him why the gasoline price is so high. He decided to cut in half the number of permits and licenses on federal lands and federal waters, and also would be build the Keystone Pipeline. I got a chance to ask him why it was with a deficit so severe and such a threat to our future that the president would spend $90 billion on so-called green energy jobs. Anybody here have one of those? I keep looking. When he called the deficit un-American and unpatriotic, he was the one that created the first $1 trillion deficit and had a $1 trillion deficit every one of his 4 years in office. I asked him again why it was when he said that in his first year, his highest priority would be to put in place an immigration plan that would solve our immigration problems. Why instead he never filed a piece of legislation for immigration reform. I asked him one more question, and that was why it was that when he promised that health insurance premiums would go down for the average family in America by $2,500 a year, this year, be down by $2,500. Instead, it's gone up by $2,500. And you know, with median incomes in America at about $50,000, that $5,000 difference is a huge difference for the American people. This has been a tough time. And, you know, we heard his answers. Or his non-answers, as the case may be. But you can't really blame him, because he pointed out the other day that you can't fix Washington from the inside. He says you got to do it from the outside. Well, we're going to give him that chance. On one thing, and that is this is a critical election, and that the paths that we would take our nation down are quite different. He, for instance, is going to raise taxes. His vice president this week blurted out the truth. They plan on raising taxes $1 trillion. They've already raised them $1 trillion, so it's really $2 trillion when you put that together. That's an increase in taxes on small business, among other places. And by the way, that'll mean less jobs. It's been calculated that his tax plan, raising taxes, will cost 700,000 jobs. I will not raise taxes on small business, and I will not raise taxes on rather than costing 700,000 jobs, my tax plan will help create 7 million jobs. If he's re-elected, why his plans would take us down to installing Obamacare. By the way, that extra $2,500 you're spending this year, it'll go up even more, because the Congressional Budget Office has calculated that Obamacare will cost another $2,500 above what you'd otherwise be paying. And also, you'll put a bureaucrat in the doctor's office with you. In my view, we got to focus on getting the cost of health care under control, and we have to repeal and replace Obamacare. Now, this path takes us down a course that will cut our funding for Medicare for today's seniors, not for tomorrow's seniors, for today's seniors, by $716 billion. I will honor the promise made to our seniors. I'll restore the $716 billion he would cut. If he was going to get re-elected, well, you know what's going to happen, which is another 4 years of trillion-dollar deficits, putting us on the way to $20 trillion. You see that clock? There it is over there. Our national debt right now is $16.1 trillion. That would be $20 trillion if he were re-elected at the end of his 4th year. And let me tell you, that would put in jeopardy the American dream for our kids and actually for a lot of us as well. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to make sure we cut federal spending, we cap federal spending at 20% of the budget, and we finally get America on track to a balanced budget. Romney! 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 hear what he had to say? I didn't either. I kept looking for a specific plan as to what he was going to do to create jobs. I've heard more of the same. Stimulus, hiring more government workers, raising taxes. Those things don't create jobs. They cost jobs. The American people are having a hard time right now. You realize that the number of people in America, the participation of our adults in the workforce were the same as at the time he got elected, why our unemployment rate would be about 11%. People in this country are having a hard time finding a job. People in this country are having a hard time making ends meet, even if they do have a job. And so it's time to have someone who's elected president who actually has a plan, and will create 12 million jobs and rising income. That's the kind of future we need to have for America. And you know the things. I've got 5 things. You heard me talk about it. I don't have to look at notes to know what they are, by the way. I know what they are. Number one, we're going to take advantage of our energy, our coal, our gas. We're going to double the number of permits on federal lands and in federal waters, so we're going to get the oil off the shore of Alaska, and we're going to build that pipeline from Canada as well. Gasoline prices, because we got to take advantage of our energy resources here. People are struggling under the high cost of energy, and that, by the way, creates new jobs too. 3.5 to 4 million jobs will come back if we really take advantage of our energy resources. Number 2, we're going to make trade work for us. We're going to open up new markets for trade. You, particularly here in Florida, will have opportunities to sell goods in Latin America nearby. Language opportunities and time zone opportunities will do well opening up more trade. But I'll tell you this, I will crack down on China or any other nation that cheats. My third thing is this, I want to make sure that our people have the skills for the jobs of today. So those 47 different federal training programs that all report into 8 different agencies, think of the waste and the overhead. I want to take the money from those programs, give Florida its fair share, and say, Florida, you create the programs best for your own people. I want to fix our schools for the jobs of tomorrow so our kids have the skills they need to succeed. And I know what it takes to do that. It takes a focus on the teachers. Let me tell you, for us to fix our schools, it means put the kids and the parents and the teachers first and put the teachers union behind like you've done here in Florida. Number 4, I want to make sure that every entrepreneur and every business that's thinking about growing knows that America is not going to become Greece. Or otherwise they won't invest here. We're on a path to Greece with the kind of spending this president is doing. And so I'm going to make sure we balance the budget as I described earlier. And one more thing. I'm going to champion small business. 55% of all the jobs in America over the last 50 years came from small business. And they're getting crushed right now with higher taxes and regulators that don't understand small business. There's also this idea known as card check. You may not have heard of this. The president promotes it. He's promised to push it. When he speaks with the AFL-CIO, he's going to take away the right of our workers to vote by secret ballot as to whether or not they want the union. And that will force unions workers that don't want them in business to go on. I will protect and help small business. We'll get small business growing again and get America creating jobs for small businesses. Two very different paths. I've got a path to create 12 million jobs. His answer is, well, we're just going to go forward. And I think forewarned is a better word. We don't we do not want, and we cannot afford 4 more years like the last 4 years. Now I want to know how confident I am in the future. I'm confident as I see you here. I know of your patriotism and your love of the country. I know you're not here just because you like me, or, well, maybe because you like that. And even because you're conservative Republicans, but because you care about America. That's great to hear. And I've seen America. I've seen the greatness of the human spirit in my fellow Americans. It gives me confidence in our future. I know we can rise to the occasion time and again. I've seen it throughout my life. When I was, well, a kid in school. Actually, this was in graduate school. I got to meet a guy named Billy Holtz. And Bill began the business, was very successful, and then he was involved in an accident, became quadriplegic. And I just saw him a couple of weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago in Atlanta. He came to an event. And it's not easy for Billy to get around, quadriplegic. But his wife was there, and he can't move his arms or his legs, and he can barely speak. And they brought him forward, big crowd around him, very hot. I reached down and I put my hand on Billy's shoulder and I whispered into his ear. And I said, "Billy, God bless you. I love you." And he whispered back to me. I couldn't quite hear what he said. He tried to speak loud enough for me to hear. He died the next day. And Billy's courage was seen in his life, because even after this accident, he devoted himself to things he cared about, like spinal injury research. He's a great man. I've seen that kind of spirit. I saw it in a young boy. When I was a younger man living in Massachusetts, I used to visit a family. You may have seen them at the Republican convention not far from here, the Oporowski family. I saw them regularly, and then their son David, at age about 14, got leukemia. He moved very quickly. It was clear he was not going to make it. And I went into his room one night when he was in bed, and he asked me a very difficult question. He said, "Mitt, what's next?" He called me Brother Romney. "What's next?" And I talked to him about what I believe is next. And then a few days later, when he was in the hospital, I got a call. As I recall, I was at work, and he said, "Could you come by?" And he said, "You went to law school, right?" "Yeah." He said, "Could you come by and write my will for me?" This is a 14-year-old son of a firefighter in Medford, Massachusetts. And so I went to David's bedside and got a piece of legal paper and made it look very official. And then David proceeded to tell me what he wanted to give to his friends. He talked about his fishing rod and who would get that. He talked about his skateboard, who'd get that. And his rifle, that went to his brother. I've seen the character of a young man like David who wasn't emotional or crying. He had his eyes wide open. There's a saying, clear eyes, full heart, can't lose. David couldn't lose. I love that young man. I met a woman at the GOP convention, Jane Horton of Oklahoma. Her husband, a sharpshooter in the United States military, off in Afghanistan. On the day she's packaging up some goodies to go in his birthday package, a knock comes at the door, and they inform her that her husband had been killed. And she decides to devote herself to helping the families of others who've lost their loved ones. He was killed on September 9th of 2011. And this was a time when some very misguided people were protesting at the funerals of our service men and women. Do you recall that? They came to the funeral of her husband. And she was asked, "What do you think about this?" And this is the quote. She said this: "Chris died for them to be able to protest. Chris died for them to be able to protest." This is quite a nation we live in. National hymns and anthems. I love that stanza, that verse in America the Beautiful. "Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life." Well, the members of the armed forces here and our veterans, please raise your hands so we can recognize them. Next to 4 fellows, as I recall, who had all served in the Second World War. The one right next to me had been on the USS Tennessee on the day it was hit in Pearl Harbor. He was the lookout. He said he could lock eyes, and did lock eyes, with the pilot that was bringing in armament that would hit their ship. He was injured, but wanted to serve for 33 years in the U.S. Navy. These men and women are the greatest generation. They held a torch for the whole world to see. Torch of freedom, liberty. And not as many of them as there used to be, and they're getting older, so they can't hold the torch quite as high. I was inspired just the other day. I was happened to be in Toledo, Ohio, and a Toledo girl right there. Roll. And this was an honor flight coming back. I was leaving at the airport just as this honor flight was coming in, with men and women, mostly from the Second World War, but also from the Korean War, that had been to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials and come home. And I went at the bottom of the ramp they were using to come off the airplane and shook their hands as they came off the aircraft. And the last few that came off were in wheelchairs. They're getting pretty old. And one of them, second to the last, he came down, and I shook his hand and wished him the very best. And then they were proceeding to roll him out. And it was a corridor kind of like this, with flags on each side, with people clapping and cheering as these soldiers would be brought through. And as they were ready to push him through that corridor of flags, he stopped the person pushing them and worked to get into his coat and pulled out an American flag and started waving. This is a great nation. This is a great people. We face extraordinary challenges right now in this country. But I'm absolutely convinced that given the patriotism of the American people, given our passion for one another and our compassion as a people, and given the can-do entrepreneurial spirit of America, we're going to overcome any challenge we have as long as we have leaders that will tell the truth and fight for America. It's time for us to grab that torch that the greatest generation has held. And as we're going to grab that torch together, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep America strong, to build strong families, to preserve strong values, to build a strong economy, to keep a military second to none in the world. Yeah. I've got a request with you. I want you also to commit. I want you to go find someone who voted for President Obama last time and convince them, well, just remind them how bad it's been these last 4 years and tell them they got to pick with us. Because I'm telling you, Florida, we're going to win Florida, we're going to take back the White House.